Hey y'all, so I want to do a 3 to 4 minute video talking about a back the envelope calculation, or in other words, a quick and dirty. So if you're interested in commercial real estate, pull up your Excel. Let's go through this together. It's super fun, super valuable, super easy. So the first thing to know about a quick and dirty or a back the envelope is you got to understand what a cap rate is. You got to understand what a yield on cost is. So I've got a couple numbers here. So in real estate, you got two options. A is you can buy a fully built out building. Let's say you want to buy an apartment. You can either buy that apartment already built and it's stabilized, it's got tenants, and you're buying it at some market cap. Or B, you can go out, find the land, build your own building, lease it up, stabilize it, and then sell it or operate it however you want. They're two very different scenarios, and developers use what's called a development spread to kind of gauge the benefit for them of that added risk to go out and develop. So let's take a step back. What cap rate is basically the relationship between the net operating income and the price of an asset. So you see, I just did 2.5 million divided into 50 million. So let's say we can buy an apartment for 50 million bucks, and it's gonna make 2.5 million in net operating income per year. So in other words, it's a return. Cap rate is just a high level return. But remember, it doesn't take into account anything under NOI on the income statement. And it doesn't take into account time value of money. So, but at a high level, it's a return. So we can make 5% a year on this $50 million property. Now, from a developer standpoint, let's say if we build an apartment in the same area, it's probably going to get similar rents. Let's say this one's new too. So assuming they have the same net operating income, but let's say like we could build this thing for $8 million less because we're not buying it, we're building it. Then yield on cost is the same calculation. It's just that NOI divided into the cost to build. Put cost to build. Put this up here so you guys don't forget. So this is our NOIs. This is our purchase price. Cool. So you can see our yield on cost is 5.95%. So that 0.95% or 95 basis points is the premium to the developer for taking on the extra risk to make that project. Or in other words, it's the developer spread. So let's scrap this and let's do a real life example real quick. So I'm going to drop in something that I worked on recently. So I just did a case competition, and the land we were looking at, we were assuming it would be about 6 million hard cost to build. We were going to do some student housing, an office building, restaurant, and some townhomes. So we were assuming our total hard cost would be about 99 million. Soft costs. So this is, your architect, building permits, legal, anything that doesn't include the hard cost of building the building. Would be about 24 million, carrying cost 12 million. So initial project cost, let's find the sum of all this, of about 143 million. Let's actually call this, so you don't forget what we're doing, calculating the development spread. And I'll try to share some Excel tips with you guys as I go throughout this. But I do like to keep things pretty, make it look nice. Let's just spread these out. I don't know why I'm getting some borders. Alt HBN to delete any borders. Okay. So for this particular project, we were assuming that our stabilized NOI would be about 9,781,939. So what stabilized means is usually it means your asset is about 95% occupied. And it just depends on the market, because if you live in a market where maybe multifamily is not doing too hot, everybody's at 90%, then you could assume that being at 90% occupancy was stabilized for you as well. Okay, so yield on cost. So if you remember, yield on cost is just that stabilized NOI divided by our cost to build. Control 1 to get to cell formatting. We're going to change this to a percentage. Yeah, we'll keep two decimal places. So you can see our yield on cost is 6.81%. Now, at the end of, we built this thing up, we've stabilized it, we're going to go sell this thing. So we go get some sales comps. We talk to brokers in the area. They tell us that projects like ours, the same build, the same size, similar area and location are trading for a market cap rate of around, let's call it 5.18%, because that was our average cap rate across those 5 assets that we were doing, or exit cap rate, I should say, that we were assuming. So, like you saw earlier, the development spread is just the difference of these two numbers. But you're not going to hear about, like, people don't really call it 1.63%. It's typically expressed in what's called basis points. So to find basis points, you're just going to take that percentage, multiply it by 10,000, because there's 100 basis points in 1%. So 1.63% is just 163 basis points. Let's format this a little bit, get rid of both these decimal places. Cool. So that's your developer spread, 163 points. Now you got to ask, is this a reasonable spread? I did a case competition once. They asked us what our development spread was, and we told them, and they're like, no, that's way too high. That's not reasonable at all. It's not accurate. So let's just write a little if statement. So if 163 is less than 150, return no. If it's greater, return yes. And then a cool little trick is you can do, so press Alt H, and then right here, L, manage rules R. And then we can make a new rule for this. Use a formula to determine which cells to format. We go down here, equals, and we're going to choose the cell we want to format, equals, and we're going to give it a parameter. So if it's yes, I want this baby to turn green. And let's give it another rule now. And let's say if this guy is equal to no, then I want it to be red. Cool. So see how it turned green? Because 163 basis points is greater than 150. So what I've heard is a typical developer spread is about 150 to 250 basis points. So just keep that in mind, but I'm sure it varies depending on the asset, the location, and the developer themselves, kind of what their risk appetite is. So now you can take this a little further and you can calculate a profit margin. So to find a profit margin, you're just going to take the difference between the yield on cost and the market cap rate that you're going to exit at, that you can sell at. And you're going to, let's see, subtract. No, I'm doing something wrong. How did I do this? Excuse me. So you're going to divide your yield on cost into your market cap rate and then subtract 1. So you can see our profit margin on this project would have been about 31%. And then you can hone down on an actual dollar profit if you take 31% times the initial project costs. So we are assuming we can make about 45 million on this project at this profit margin. But something that you have to consider is, how do I put it? There's limitations for the developer spread. Let's write some of these limitations. So the developer spread doesn't account for a couple things. To automatically respace this cell, Alt HOI. So those things are the cost of capital, interest rates, market volatility. I don't know if you guys can see this share screen thing. Let me get this out of the way just in case. That also doesn't account for cap rate compression or expansion. And then doesn't account for leasing variability during the hold period. So keep in mind, like this NOI, that's a projection of what we think we can get once this thing is stabilized. But throughout those first 12 months of stabilizing this thing, we don't actually know what's going to happen. These projections could change. We don't know what's going to happen to cap rates in the area, because if brokers come back and say, well, market cap rates are for this asset are actually at a 5, just under 5.5 instead of what we were projecting. Can you see that automatically that kills our deal? It's about a $7 million swing. So these are the limitations of the developer spread that you have to keep in mind, which is why if we find out that we can get a reasonable spread by doing a back of the envelope calculation, that's when you're going to want to go do a more sophisticated discounted cash flow analysis, make your pro forma, underwrite it all out, model your cash flows on a monthly basis, and just do it more in depth and use, return metrics like your IRR, NPV, equity multiple. It just helps you go a little bit deeper. But yeah, let's say our cost of capital is 8%. If this profit margin was close to that, like, you wouldn't want to take the deal, right? This is kind of fun. So we'll do another little something. So let's say, let's do an if and statement. So if our profit margin is greater than the cost of capital, and if our developer spread is greater than 150, then we're going to say get underwriting. Else pass on the project. Cool. And then, yeah, if we want to, format that again, Alt HN, excuse me, Alt HL R, new rule, use a formula to determine which cells to format, equals. So we're going to use cell G20 equals. So if it's get underwriting, we're going to make it green. Okay, new rule. If it's pass, then we're going to make it red. Cool. So in this particular case competition that we had done, to put a border on, it's just Alt HBS, just to pretty it up a little bit. So in this competition that we did, at the end, we got critiqued, and the CEO of the particular company we were presenting to was like, your guys' land costs are so off. Something we didn't take into account is that land costs, even if it's all on the same 20 acres, like, and you say you split that into 3 parcels, like we were going to do for this project, and have student housing on one part, office on one part, and townhomes on another. We were assuming that the land costs would just be the same for everything, but it's not. Land costs are determined by the asset that's going to be on them usually. So if you're going to build an office on a piece of land, that's probably going to be more expensive than in, a house or some apartments. Does that make sense? So watch what happens. He told us that our land price would probably be more like 20 million. So yeah, we were way off. Oh, I just did 2 million. But you'll notice that when we do 20 million, we now see that it's not a reasonable spread. our development spread is just over 100 basis points. And if the typical developer targets 150 to 250, you know, right there with this back of the envelope, like it's probably not a good deal. And we know that this is a pass and we shouldn't spend more time underwriting this because that developer spread just isn't big enough. The benefit of developing is doesn't outweigh the cost of just going out and buying a property. So it'd be more beneficial probably just to go buy in this case. But yeah, hopefully this makes sense to you guys and you're able to learn a little bit. It's a lot of fun playing with this, and now you guys can build out your own model and just have some fun with it. So let me know if you guys have any questions. And with that, I'll end this. See ya.